Keanu Reeves just wanted a quiet meal at a roadside diner until the waitress slipped him a folded note with his name on it. It was written by her teenage brother, who had died months earlier. Inside that letter was something so powerful, it stopped Keanu cold and changed the course of his life forever. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The rain came down in sheets, blurring the windshield until even the headlights couldn't cut through the darkness. Keanu squinted past the wipers as they slapped back and forth, a dull rhythm against the storm. The interstate stretched endlessly ahead, slick with water and lit only by the occasional flash of lightning. He'd driven this stretch of highway dozens of times before. Tonight, though, it felt different. He felt different, tired, hollow, like the road was dragging something out of him he couldn't name. He tapped the steering wheel, glanced at the phone glowing on the passenger seat. Dozens of unread messages, missed calls, 2 from his publicist, 3 from his assistant, and 1 marked urgent from a producer he didn't even like. He reached over, turned the phone face down, and let out a long breath. He didn't want to hear another request, or answer another question, or fix someone else's problem. Not tonight. For once, he didn't want to be the guy who always had the right thing to say, the calm voice in the chaos, the dependable one. He just wanted to disappear for a little while, to not be seen, to not be needed. Outside, the storm thickened, pushing his car gently to the right as wind whipped across the open road. He tightened his grip on the wheel, slowed to a crawl, and looked for somewhere to pull over. A rest stop, a gas station, anything with light and warmth. Then he saw it. Through the downpour, a flicker of neon glowed on the side of the road. The sign buzzed in red and yellow, Darla's Diner, open 24 HRS. A few of the letters had gone dark. The S in Darla's was barely hanging on, flickering like a heartbeat that didn't want to quit. The building beneath it looked like it had been built in the 50s and forgotten soon after. But it was open, and that was enough. Keanu took the exit, tires sliding slightly on the wet pavement, and pulled into the small gravel lot. 3 cars were parked haphazardly near the entrance, plus an old motorcycle leaning against a rusted bike rack. The rain pounded on the roof of his car like 1,000 tiny fists. He reached for the hoodie draped over his seat, pulled it on, and tugged the brim of his baseball cap low. No one needed to know who he was tonight. No cameras, no questions, just coffee, maybe pie, and hopefully a little silence. As he opened the door, rain slashed across his face, soaking through his sleeves in seconds. He jogged to the entrance, boots splashing through puddles, and grabbed the chrome handle on the diner's glass door. A small bell chimed as it opened. Warmth hit him immediately, along with a scent of fried food, burnt coffee, and something sweet baking in the back. He stepped inside, shaking off the rain like a stray dog finding shelter, and closed the door behind him. He didn't know it yet, but this quiet stop in the storm was about to change everything. The diner was nearly empty. A trucker sat, slumped, in a booth near the window, arms folded across his chest, eyes closed, his coffee untouched. A young couple shared a slice of cherry pie at the far end of the room, laughing quietly between bites. At the counter, an older man with silver hair flipped slowly through a newspaper that looked older than the man himself. Keanu stepped deeper inside. The floor creaked softly beneath his boots. Vinyl booths lined both sides of the narrow space, most of them empty. The lighting was dim but warm, casting a kind of golden softness on everything. It felt like stepping into another time, a place untouched by the digital world, where people still talked over coffee and left their phones in their pockets. From behind the counter, a voice greeted him. "Take a seat wherever you like. I'll be right with you." He looked over. The woman behind the counter had her back turned, pouring coffee into a thick ceramic mug. She wore a faded blue apron, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. When she turned, her face was kind, tired in a way that felt familiar. Her name tag read, Emily. Keanu gave her a polite nod and slid into the booth nearest the back corner, away from the windows, away from the door, away from everyone. He sank into the seat and exhaled slowly. The leather squeaked under his weight. The rain kept tapping against the glass like it was trying to get in. A moment later, Emily walked over, holding a menu and a mug. She set both on the table, her smile small but genuine. "Rough night?" she asked. Keanu looked up, surprised by the honesty of her voice. It wasn't the kind of question asked by someone who recognized him or wanted anything from him. She was just being human. "You could say that," he replied softly. She nodded, like she understood more than he was saying. "Well, you're in the right place. Nothing like coffee and hot food to patch a soul back together." He watched her pour the coffee. The scent hit him simple, strong, nothing fancy. Not the kind that came with oat milk or foam art. Just coffee, real, honest. "You want a few minutes with the menu?" she asked, tucking her order pad into her apron. "Sure, thanks." Emily gave him one last nod and walked back toward the counter. As she moved away, Keanu glanced down at the menu. It was laminated and slightly worn, with pictures of pancakes and burgers that looked like they hadn't been updated in decades. He smiled. For the first time all night, something in him began to relax. He wasn't Keanu Reeves, the actor here. He was just a tired man in a booth on a rainy night, in a place that didn't ask questions. But what waited for him before he left this diner would ask something much deeper. Keanu sipped his coffee slowly, letting the heat spread through his chest. He hadn't realized how cold he'd been until now. Not just from the rain, but from the world, the pressure, the noise. Out there, he was always moving, always expected to be something, do something, carry something. But in here, in this forgotten corner of a small town, no one cared who he was. No one was watching. And strangely, that anonymity felt like a gift. His eyes drifted to the window. The parking lot outside was nearly invisible behind sheets of rain. The neon sign reflected off the glass, distorted by droplets, blinking like a heartbeat in the dark. For a moment, the world outside seemed far away, like a place he'd left behind on purpose. He looked back down at the menu. Pancakes, omelets, fried chicken, meatloaf, comfort food, every bit of it. And then, near the bottom, he saw it. House special, grilled ribeye with mashed potatoes and green beans, served after 10 p.m. He smiled again. That sounded like exactly what he needed. Emily returned, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Decided?" "Yeah," Keanu said. "Steak, medium rare, mashed potatoes, and the green beans, too." "You've got good taste," she said, jotting it down. "That was my brother's favorite. He used to say it tasted like Sundays." Keanu looked up. Something about the way she said it, past tense, gentle, guarded, made him pause. "Your brother?" he asked. She nodded, her smile softening. "Liam. He passed a few months ago. Cancer." He didn't say anything right away. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound hollow. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Emily gave a small nod, eyes distant. He was 16, but he saw the world like he'd lived 100 years. Always thinking bigger, always trying to fix things that didn't even belong to him. Keanu's throat tightened. He saw something in her expression. Grief, yes, but something else too. Pride, strength. "I bet he was the kind of kid who saw the world's problems and still believed he could solve them," Keanu said. Emily's eyes met his. "Exactly." She stood there for a second longer, then tucked her pen away and gave him a small, grateful smile. "I'll get that started. It won't be long." As she walked away, Keanu leaned back into the booth. He stared at the steam rising from his coffee and felt something unfamiliar begin to stir deep in his chest. He'd come here to disappear for a while, but something told him he wasn't meant to stay invisible tonight. Something was coming, and it was going to change everything. The rain hadn't let up. Outside, it played a soft, constant rhythm on the diner windows, like nature's own lullaby. Inside, the world felt still. Time didn't rush here. It lingered. Keanu sat with both hands wrapped around his mug, the warmth slowly seeping into his fingers. He watched the way the steam curled upward and disappeared into the air. The clatter of dishes behind the counter blended with the low hum of an old jukebox that hadn't changed its playlist since the late 80s. A raspy voice sang something about second chances and quiet roads, and Keanu couldn't help but let a small smile tug at the corner of his mouth. The booth was soft, worn smooth by decades of people just like him, tired, searching, or simply hungry. The table had a little chip on the edge, revealing wood beneath the red laminate. A napkin dispenser sat neatly in the corner, along with a glass jar of sugar that had a crack running through its lid. It all felt real, not curated, not branded, not cleaned up for cameras or campaigns, just honest. He heard soft footsteps approach, and Emily appeared again, holding a water glass in one hand and the pot of coffee in the other. "Need a top-up?" she asked, already reaching for his cup. Keanu nodded. "Please." She refilled it gently, careful not to spill. Then she set the water down with a small clink and slipped into the seat across from him for a moment, adjusting the strap of her apron. "You from around here?" she asked casually, her tone light. "No," Keanu replied. "Just passing through. Took a wrong turn, or maybe the right one." She gave a short laugh. "That's how most people find this place. It's not exactly a destination." He looked around. "It should be." That made her pause. Her eyes softened for a second, then flicked down toward her lap. When she looked back up, her voice was quieter. "I like it here," she said. "It's not much, but people come here when they've got nowhere else to go, or when they need to remember what simple feels like." Keanu nodded. "I think that's why I stopped." "You look like someone who needed a real meal," she said, teasing gently. "I probably do," he admitted. There was a beat of silence. Not awkward, just still. Then she said, "My brother used to say that too, that people come here for something more than just food." Said it was a place where people showed up wearing masks they didn't even know they had, and sometimes left without them. Keanu looked at her, curiosity growing in his eyes. "Sounds like your brother was pretty insightful." Emily's smile dimmed, but her eyes didn't lose their light. "He was." Emily glanced over her shoulder toward the kitchen window, as if checking to make sure no one needed her. Then she returned her gaze to Keanu, her fingers now absent-mindedly tracing the edge of the table. "His name was Liam," she said softly. "He was 16 when we lost him. Leukemia. Came out of nowhere. The kind of thing you don't see coming until it knocks the air out of you." Keanu didn't speak. He just listened, the way people do when the words coming toward them feel sacred. He was the youngest in our family. It was just the two of us left after our parents passed. I basically raised him. He was more than my brother. He was my reason to keep going. She swallowed. The rain outside drummed louder for a moment. He had this wild imagination, always dreaming up inventions, sketching blueprints, asking questions no one else thought to ask. I used to joke that he came from the future and just accidentally landed in our boring little town. Keanu's voice was quiet. Sounds like a rare soul. He was, she nodded. When the doctors told us the treatments weren't working anymore, I thought he'd get bitter, angry, but he didn't. He just doubled down on his ideas. Said, "If I'm not going to be here long, I better leave something behind that might help somebody else." She stopped, the silence stretching long enough for the jukebox to cycle to a new song. This one, slower. A piano and a voice that cracked on purpose. Keanu looked at her carefully. Did he what? Leave something behind. Emily gave a small smile. One of those smiles that comes from equal parts pain and pride. More than I can explain. Pages and pages of notes, drawings, equations I couldn't make sense of. He'd sit at the kitchen table for hours, working with a calculator and graph paper like he was solving the world's problems. Keanu leaned forward slightly. What kind of things did he work on? All kinds. Renewable energy, clean water systems, low-cost medical devices, stuff way beyond his grade level. Some of it I didn't even realize was real until I Googled the terms. She looked at him then, and something in her expression changed. He used to talk about people like you, not actors necessarily, but people who were dreamers, builders, fixers. He'd say, they carry the world like it's fragile, and they walk through it, trying to patch the cracks before everything falls apart. Keanu blinked slowly, caught off guard by how precise that felt, how deeply it hit. He said one day he'd meet someone like that, or that maybe I would. Emily looked down at the table, then back at him with a strange softness in her eyes. I don't know why I'm telling you all this, Keanu did, but he didn't say it out loud. Emily stood up slowly, wiping her hands on her apron out of habit more than need. I should check on your order, she said. The kitchen's probably got it on the grill by now. Keanu nodded, but before she turned to leave, he asked gently, do you still have his notes? The ones he left behind? She hesitated. I do, she said. I've kept them in a shoebox under my bed. Been meaning to go through them, but it's hard. Some days I open the lid and just sit there looking at the top page. Can't even bring myself to read it. He didn't push. He just nodded, understanding that grief doesn't follow schedules. Emily gave him a small smile. Anyway, I'll be right back. As she walked away, Keanu looked back out at the window, the rain still falling in steady sheets. He thought about Liam, 16, dying, still dreaming, still trying to help people. He wondered what kind of mind worked like that, what kind of heart. When Emily returned, she had his plate in hand. Steak, mashed potatoes, and green beans, just like the menu promised. She set it in front of him, with the kind of quiet pride only someone who's carried both sorrow and strength can wear. I hope you're hungry, she said. Keanu smiled faintly. I am. She turned to go, but stopped again. I'm not supposed to do this, she said, glancing around the diner. But my brother, he made me promise something before he passed. He looked up. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was old and worn around the edges, like it had been carried for a long time. On the outside, in faded ink, was written, "For the one who understands." She placed it on the table, right next to his plate. I don't know if it's you, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, but something tells me I'd know when the right person walked in, and I think maybe you're him. Keanu stared at the note. He didn't reach for it. Not yet. Emily gave him one last look, then turned and walked back toward the counter. Keanu's heart pounded. He didn't know what was inside that paper, but something in him already knew it was going to change everything. If you believe that one person's dream can change the world, hit the like button and comment, I believe in second chances below. The steak sizzled as Emily set the plate down in front of him, the warmth rising into the air and mingling with the scent of grilled meat and peppered potatoes. Keanu looked at the plate, then back up at her. She was smiling not out of politeness, but something softer, something nostalgic. That was Liam's favorite, she said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Steak, mashed potatoes, and green beans, always in that order. Keanu's eyes shifted back to the food. It looked like comfort on a plate, familiar, grounding, the kind of meal someone would request when they needed to feel safe again. He picked up his fork and knife, but didn't move. Something about the way she said it. Liam's favorite carried weight, as if this wasn't just food. It was memory, a tribute, a small altar dressed in mashed potatoes and gravy. The diner remained quiet, except for the clink of utensils and the occasional low murmur from the couple in the corner. Outside, the rain pressed steadily against the glass, making the place feel like a bubble, untouched by the world. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, Keanu felt himself slowing down. The tension in his shoulders softened. Emily stood nearby for a moment longer, like she wanted to say more, but was still measuring something inside herself. Finally, she reached into the deep pocket of her apron and pulled out the folded piece of paper again. She had already placed it beside his plate once before, but this time she held it out deliberately, her voice lowered. I didn't tell you everything, she said. This note, it wasn't just a general wish. Liam wrote it for you. Keanu looked at her, confused but attentive. Emily took a breath. He wrote it a few weeks before he passed. Said he had this dream, this feeling that he had something to say to Keanu Reeves. At the time, I thought it was the medication talking, or just a kid trying to cope. But the way he said it, her voice, cracked just slightly. He said it wasn't just for you, it was meant for you. Keanu's brow furrowed gently. She unfolded the first layer of the paper, just enough to reveal the front. In faint, unsteady handwriting, almost childlike, but careful, were the words, "For Keanu Reeves from Liam." She placed it in his hand. Keanu stared at it. His fingers curled around the edges, not opening it, just holding the weight of it. The ink had smudged in one corner, probably from Emily's fingers over the years. The fold lines were worn. This wasn't some newly written fan letter. This had lived through time, through grief, through memory. Emily didn't push him. She just stepped back, giving him space. Keanu didn't speak for a long while. He simply held the note, fingertips brushing the edges, eyes lowered, as if the folded paper radiated something sacred. His steak sat untouched, the steam slowly fading as the cool air from the vent above drifted over the plate. The world around him dimmed. The sounds of the diner, the clinking of coffee cups, the low hum of a jukebox playing some forgotten ballad faded into the background. This was not what he expected when he pulled off the highway. He had come in for warmth, for solitude, for escape. But now, this small piece of paper in his hand had become a mirror, reflecting something deeper, something he hadn't touched in a long time. Across the counter, Emily leaned gently against the register, trying not to stare but unable to pull her gaze away. Her chest tightened. She hadn't told anyone else about the note, not even her parents. It had stayed in her drawer for nearly 2 years. But something about the way Keanu had walked in, drenched and quiet, had triggered something inside her unknowing. Like this was the moment Liam had written for. Keanu finally looked up at her again, his voice quiet. How did he even know me? Emily's smile was faint, but it held warmth. Liam watched The Matrix every time he went in for treatment. Said it made him feel braver, like he wasn't trapped in a hospital bed, but somewhere bigger. He didn't just like the action, he loved the quiet parts. The way you looked at people, the way you paused before you spoke. Keanu's throat tightened. He hadn't expected that. Emily stepped closer again, just enough to speak without others hearing. One day, when he was feeling really weak, he told me, "If I don't make it, will you promise me something?" I asked him what. He said, "Find Keanu Reeves, give him my note. He'll understand." She let out a soft laugh, almost embarrassed. Of course, I thought he was being dramatic. But I promised, because that's what you do for someone you love, right? Keanu looked back down at the paper. He still didn't open it. But now it wasn't out of hesitation. It was reverence. He placed the note gently on the table, right beside his untouched plate. Then he nodded, just slightly, toward the seat across from him. "You got a few minutes?" he asked. Emily blinked in surprise. "Sure. Sit with me." She glanced around the diner, then back at him. The 2 regulars at the counter were lost in their crossword puzzle. The cook in the back had earbuds in. No one was watching. She grabbed a glass of water, slid into the booth across from him, and smiled. "Only if you promise to eat that steak before it gets cold." Keanu took his knife and fork, slicing into the now warm but not hot steak, and took a slow bite. The mashed potatoes were buttery, the kind that reminded him of being in his childhood kitchen before the world got complicated. Before fame, before loss. He chewed thoughtfully, then looked at Emily again. "Liam had a beautiful soul, didn't he?" Emily nodded. "He was one of those people who knew things like deep things. He'd make adults cry with the stuff he said. Doctors used to come in just to talk to him. He had that kind of light." Keanu gently wiped his mouth. "And you carried his light here, in this diner, in that note." Emily's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back. "I didn't know when or if I'd ever give it to anyone," she whispered. "But the second you walked through that door, I felt it. Like Liam tapped me on the shoulder and said, "That's him. I can't explain it." Keanu's gaze drifted to the window. Rain still tapped gently on the glass. Outside, the world was wet, quiet, reflective. "Sometimes," he said, "the people we lose find a way to finish their stories through us, even after they're gone." He reached for the note again. This time, his fingers didn't tremble. He didn't open it, at least not yet, but he pressed it gently between both hands, closed his eyes, as if taking a moment to feel the weight of it. Not the paper, but what it carried. Love. Hope. A dying boy's last wish to reach someone he admired. The bell above the diner door jingled. An older man in a poncho walked in, dripping and chuckling about the storm. Emily glanced toward him, offered a smile, and raised a hand. "Be right with you, Tom." She looked back at Keanu. "I should," Keanu shook his head, just slightly. "Go ahead." She stood, touched the edge of the table once, as if grounding herself, then returned to work. Keanu sat alone again, but it didn't feel like solitude anymore. The note sat before him. He was no longer tired, no longer running. Whatever this letter contained, it wasn't just for him. It was something he was meant to carry forward. And he would. Not yet. Not tonight. But soon. Outside, the storm began to lighten. Keanu sat back in the booth, his hands finally ready. The diner had quieted again. Emily was in the kitchen, laughing with the cook. A soft tune played from the jukebox, some old country ballad. But all he could hear was the soft crinkle of the paper as he unfolded the letter. It was a single sheet, aged at the corners. The handwriting was uneven, the pen occasionally shaky. But the words were bold and centered near the top. "Dear Keanu Reeves, if you're reading this, then my sister Emily found someone who reminds her of the people I believed in." Keanu paused. A flicker of breath escaped him. Already, the boy's words felt larger than the diner, larger than the storm outside. "I'm not famous like you, but I've seen things. And when you're sick all the time, you get to watch the world a lot more closely than people think. You start to notice the cracks, the places where things fall apart, and the people who try to hold it together. You were one of those people to me. Not because you were in movies, but because you seemed like the kind of man who still tries, even when it hurts." Keanu swallowed. His thumb pressed against the edge of the page. "I always believed we needed more people. Like you dreamers. Builders. Fixers. The ones who don't just accept things as they are. The ones who ask, what if we could do better? I couldn't walk for most of the last year, but I built something on my laptop. A design. An idea. I don't know if it works, but it's based on existing systems. It could change everything about how we power our lives." My mom thought it was silly. Emily said it was brilliant. Keanu could almost hear the boy's voice in his mind. A little shy, a little stubborn. "I used parts from broken toys, solar science kits, and videos from MIT. I don't have the credentials, but I have the heart. That has to count for something. I'm including a sketch of the battery system. It recharges itself through kinetic motion, kind of like how your body keeps going when your heart believes in something. I hope this doesn't sound too weird, but if you're the one holding this, it means Emily saw something in you. And I did too." Keanu turned the page. On the back was a hand-drawn schematic, messy but detailed. It showed a circular coil system, a rotor driven by microturbines, a feedback loop integrating solar cells and magnetic induction. It wasn't a child's doodle. It was a prototype, a dream. Keanu stared at the sketch longer than he meant to. The lines weren't perfect, but the concept was far from naive. It reminded him of something he'd once read in a Tesla white paper. Except this felt more organic, more personal, like someone had dreamt it into existence, not just engineered it. Below the diagram, Liam had written more in smaller handwriting. "This is just a rough version. I wanted to build a prototype, but I got too sick. Sometimes I felt like I had electricity in my bones, like I needed to give it to someone before I went. So here at Island, if it means something to you, if it sparks something, then maybe I didn't lose." Keanu ran a hand down his face. The hum of the diner faded into the background. He looked out the window where the rain still painted the night in streaks of silver. The roads were empty. The world had stopped spinning for a moment. I watched interviews with you. Not the ones where you promoted movies. The ones where you talked about loss, about kindness. It made me think that even if I didn't make it, I wanted my ideas to live. And maybe you'd understand what it's like to carry something that doesn't go away just because the world doesn't notice. There it was again. That haunting intuition. The way a dying teenager had tapped into something deep, deeper than science or celebrity or even sadness. It was legacy. Liam had never met Keanu, yet he'd somehow written this as if he knew him. Understood the private grief that clung behind Keanu's public smile. The pain he carried quietly, without asking for pity. Keanu's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from the enormity of it all. My sister Emily doesn't talk much about it, but I know she's scared. She puts on a brave face, but I see her eyes when she thinks I'm not looking. I made her promise that when she met someone who reminded her of the kind of future I believed in, she'd give them this letter. And Keanu, if you're reading this, I guess you're that person. So I'm asking you one last thing. Even if this idea never works, please don't stop believing that it could. Don't stop building. Don't stop fixing. And maybe, don't let my sister carry it all alone. Keanu lowered the paper and sat back. The coffee on the table had gone cold, the steak untouched. He hadn't even noticed. He stared down at the letter again, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like an actor or a man being watched. He felt like a witness to something sacred, to the last words of a boy who had nothing but dreams and still gave them away. Keanu folded the letter slowly, pressing the creases with care, as if afraid it might vanish if handled too harshly. He placed it on the table like it was something fragile, sacred. The weight of the boy's words lingered in the air, heavier than any role he had ever played, more real than any spotlight ever shined on him. He looked up. Emily was wiping down the far end of the counter, pretending not to glance over. But there was something in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her hands moved a little slower than before. She knew what she had handed him. She knew what it meant. Keanu stood and walked to the counter, carrying the folded letter with him. When she finally met his eyes, there was nothing performative in his voice. "Emily," he said softly, "your brother, he was extraordinary." She blinked fast, trying to keep the tears at bay. He thought the world forgot about people like him, people who still believed things could be better. "He didn't just believe it," Keanu replied. "He built it, right here." She smiled through the emotion. "He used to stay up late sketching things, said the world needed new maps, new machines, new hearts." Keanu nodded slowly, the words sinking in. "I've been to a lot of places," he said. "Big cities, boardrooms, studios. But I've never seen anything quite like this. Not the letter, not just the sketch, the faith, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't beg to be seen." Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. That's who he was. A long silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just deep. The kind of silence that held space for something to bloom. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it," Keanu admitted. "But I know I can't ignore it." "You don't have to do everything," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Maybe just be the person he believed you were." He looked at her, then back at the letter, and felt something shift inside. Not a lightning bolt, not a burst of inspiration, but a quiet rearranging. Like something old inside him had moved to make room for something new. "I'm going to keep this safe," he said. "I know," she answered. "He trusted you." He nodded once more, then picked up his jacket. The rain had finally stopped. The world outside was washed clean, hushed, and waiting. Before stepping out the door, Keanu turned back. "Thank you for sharing him with me." Emily smiled with tired grace. "Maybe he was meant to be shared." As Keanu stepped into the quiet of the night, the letter tucked inside his jacket, he felt the echo of Liam's voice, not as a goodbye, but as a beginning. Emily returned to the table a few minutes later, holding a small tray with a fresh pot of coffee. Her eyes were softer now, gentler, like something had released inside her. The grief wasn't gone, it never would be, but for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel so lonely. Keanu looked up as she approached, the folded letter still resting on the table between them. His hands hadn't moved from where they lay, resting gently on either side of it. "I hope it wasn't too much," she said quietly, pouring more coffee into his mug. Keanu shook his head. "It wasn't too much, it was everything." She sat across from him without asking. There weren't many customers left, just two older men playing cards near the back, and the low hum of the jukebox filling the quiet space. Rain tapped faintly at the windows again, like a soft drum roll of memory. Keanu leaned forward. "Tell me about him, about Liam." Emily smiled, almost instinctively, but it trembled. He was the kind of person who asked why not instead of why. You know what I mean? "I do." He didn't think the world was broken beyond repair. He thought it just needed more people to try. He spent his whole life trying, even when he got sick. Keanu nodded, his eyes locked on hers. He wasn't just listening, he was absorbing every word. He was obsessed with clean energy and robotics, she continued. He loved building things. I still have a drawer full of his old sketches, models, notes, written on napkins and receipts. He thought one idea, one small machine, could change the way we live. Keanu took a slow sip from his coffee. "That letter, the design inside it, it's not fantasy." "No," Emily replied, her voice proud now. He knew what he was doing. It's a prototype for a renewable energy system, a self-sustaining battery with solar and kinetic input. He thought he could power a small village with it, maybe even more. Was he in college? He was supposed to be, she said. He got accepted into MIT, full scholarship, but 2 months before he was supposed to go, he was diagnosed. Leukemia. Stage 4. Keanu exhaled through his nose, eyes flickering downward. He didn't tell anyone outside the family for a while, not even his teachers. He didn't want people feeling sorry for him. He just kept building, kept sketching, kept dreaming. Keanu swallowed, then glanced down at the folded letter again. "And he watched my films?" Emily nodded. "Every one. Some of them more times than I can count. He said you were one of the few actors who didn't just play heroes. You walked through life like someone who carried other people's pain without needing credit." Keanu didn't know how to respond to that, so he just looked at her and let the silence speak for him. Emily's fingers wrapped around her own coffee cup, though she hadn't taken a sip. Her voice softened again. "One night, a few weeks before he passed, he asked me to sit by his bed. Said he had something important to tell me. I thought maybe he was going to say goodbye, but he didn't." She paused, and Keanu waited. "He told me, if Keanu Reeves ever walks into your diner, you'll know. Don't question it. Just give him the letter." She gave a small, choked laugh. "I told him he was nuts. I mean, what are the odds?" Keanu's mouth lifted just slightly at the corners. "They're not great." Emily leaned forward. "But then you walked in. You didn't say much. You looked tired, kind, and something in my gut just whispered, 'He's the one.' Like Liam was still here, nudging me." Her eyes were wet now, but she didn't look away. "He believed that someone like you could understand. Not just the science in that letter, but the heart behind it, the dream of it. He didn't want to sell it. He wanted someone to carry it forward, someone who wouldn't turn it into just another product." Keanu's hand slowly reached for the letter again. It rested in front of him, partially unfolded, revealing the bottom of the sketch. He stared at it, the simple lines, the formula scribbled in blue ink. "He really believed in people, didn't he?" Keanu asked. "Too much sometimes," she replied. "But that was who he was. He believed in second chances, even for people he never met. Said the world only needed one person to make the right choice at the right moment, and everything could shift." Keanu looked out the window again. The rain had stopped. Outside, the pavement glistened under the streetlights, empty and quiet. "I've seen a lot," he said finally. "Been a lot of places. Met people with power, money, vision, but I don't think I've met anyone with more clarity than Liam." and I never even met him." Emily smiled gently. "That was his gift." Keanu traced the edge of the paper, careful not to damage the fragile corners. "What would he want me to do with this?" he asked. Emily didn't hesitate. "He wanted you to believe in it, and then do what you do. Not as an actor, as a human being." He used to say, "Keanu walks through fire and still offers his coat to someone cold." That was the kind of person he hoped would read it. Keanu lowered his eyes again, heart full, spirit cracked open. There were no cameras, no red carpets, no applause, only purpose, and a promise beginning to form inside him. The bell above the diner door jingled as someone stepped out into the night, but neither Keanu nor Emily noticed. Time had slowed to a stillness around them, as if the diner itself was listening. Emily reached beneath the counter and pulled out something else, a small, faded photo. She placed it on the table beside the letter. Liam was in a hospital bed, beaming, his hair gone but his smile impossibly bright. Next to him sat a small whiteboard, scribbled with equations and drawings of engines and solar panels. He was still working on ideas until his final week, Emily said. Even when he couldn't lift his arms, he'd make me hold the marker while he dictated. Keanu studied the photo. There was something in Liam's eyes, fire, intelligence, but also kindness. It reminded him of people he'd loved and lost, people who didn't get to stay. "I've lost people too," he said quietly. Emily nodded. "I know. He knew that. That's part of why he chose you." A deep silence followed. Then, Keanu picked up the letter again and carefully folded it. Not to put it away, to protect it. "May I keep this?" he asked. "Liam wanted you to have it," she said. "It's yours now." He looked at her. "Thank you for trusting me." She smiled, but there was sadness behind it. "I wasn't sure I could. After he died, I thought maybe the world wasn't worth saving. But seeing you here, the way you sat with the letter, I think Liam was right." Keanu stood up and placed a few bills on the table, far more than the cost of the meal. "You shouldn't," she began, but he raised his hand gently. "You gave me more than a meal. You gave me something to believe in." Emily blinked hard, holding back tears. He tucked the letter carefully into the inside pocket of his jacket. The sketch would stay close to his heart, not because of its potential to change the world, but because of the boy who believed it already could. As he stepped toward the door, Emily called out softly, "What are you going to do now?" Keanu paused at the threshold. Outside, the rain had fully stopped. The air smelled clean. "I'm going to do what Liam asked," he said. "I'm going to believe, and then I'm going to build." And with that, he pushed open the door and stepped into the night. Behind him, the bell chimed once more. Emily stood motionless for a moment, then looked down at the empty booth. The plate still warm, the coffee half sipped. She whispered, "He found the right person." And for the first time in months, her heart felt full. Emily stood behind the counter, her fingers twitching as if debating something silently. The diner had quieted, the night stretching deep beyond the windows. The last of the patrons gone. Keanu hadn't left yet. He lingered by the exit, one hand resting on the edge of the door frame, reluctant to step away from something that had changed him. "Wait," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu turned back. "I have one more thing," she added, reaching under the register. From a drawer locked with an old brass key, she retrieved a bundle wrapped tightly in wax paper and bound with twine. It was no bigger than a large paperback, but the way she handled it like it was sacred made Keanu pause. She laid it on the counter. Her fingers trembled as they untied the twine. "I haven't opened this since the funeral," she said softly. "He told me not to show it to just anyone. He said, only when your heart knows someone's real, someone with a soul big enough to carry it." Keanu stepped closer. Emily carefully peeled back the wax paper, revealing a weathered, leather-bound notebook. Its corners were softened by time, and smudges of graphite and ink streaked the cover. She opened it to the first page. There was no name, just a quote written in bold black pen. "The world doesn't need more noise. It needs quiet revolutions rooted in science, compassion, and courage." Keanu's breath hitched. Emily slid the book toward him. Every night, even when he was in pain, he wrote in this, drew in it, designed things. It was how he stayed alive. Hope lived in here, not just ideas. He reached for the book with both hands, lifting it slowly, reverently. It felt heavier than it looked. He opened to the second page. A pencil sketch of a child holding a cup under a tap labeled "Clean Water for All." Underneath, Liam had drawn a system of tanks, filters, and solar pumps. Annotated in tiny, meticulous handwriting were equations, alternative models, even a cost breakdown for implementation in rural towns. Keanu flipped the page. More diagrams. A modular design for portable shelters powered by compact solar batteries. There were fold-out pages, taped-in inserts, articles he had clipped from obscure journals, and even emails he'd printed. Some of them correspondence with college professors who never knew Liam was only 17. Each page was its own little universe, a blend of science and raw humanity. He wanted to be an engineer, Emily said, but not the kind who just builds things. He used to say, "I want to be the kind who fixes people's lives without them even noticing." Keanu sat back down in the booth. The sketchbook opened before him, like scripture. "This isn't just a notebook," he murmured. "This is a legacy." Keanu turned another page and paused. This time, it wasn't a drawing or blueprint. It was a letter, but not addressed to anyone in particular, just titled, "If I Could Talk to the World." His eyes scanned the words slowly. "I don't believe we're running out of time," Liam had written. "I believe we're running out of excuses." The letter went on to talk about forgotten places, reservations without clean drinking water, entire neighborhoods where the power still went out during storms and wasn't restored for days. He described his own town with both affection and heartbreak. He called it a place too beautiful to ignore, too quiet to matter. Keanu blinked hard. The words felt like someone reaching out from the grave to shake the living into awareness. There were pages with oil-smudged fingerprints and wrinkled corners, and one that had clearly been ripped out intentionally or not, Keanu couldn't tell. But the notes that followed were clearer, more determined. A section on community gardens, another on building low-cost 3D printed homes using biodegradable materials. And then, there was a sketch that made Keanu sit up straighter. It showed a restaurant kitchen, much like the one in the diner. But instead of draining used grease into waste containers, there was a rerouting system. Arrows and labels showed how the grease could be collected, purified, and repurposed into biofuel to power delivery vehicles and generators. Keanu whispered aloud. He figured this out. Emily leaned over the table, nodding. "He tested it in our backyard. Bought parts off eBay. Burned the grass a couple times. But he made it work. He was 17. 16. When he started it. 17 when he finished the prototype. He used our old lawnmower engine to prove the conversion could work. Told me, if this powers even one school bus without smoke, I'll be happy." Keanu exhaled deeply, running a hand over his mouth. Somewhere between the lines and sketches, the boy's voice emerged not just as a dreamer, but a realist. He didn't beg the world to change. He gave it instructions. Tangible, executable blueprints for betterment. The optimism wasn't naive. It was anchored in science, sweat, and a refusal to accept the phrase, "That's just how it island." "Most people twice his age aren't thinking like this," Keanu murmured. Emily's eyes welled up. He never wanted the spotlight. He just wanted someone to take what he started and not let it disappear when he did. She reached across the table and gently closed the notebook. "I kept this locked away," she whispered, "because the world's got a million people who chase attention, but almost no one who sees the unseen. Liam believed in the ones who stay quiet and just do good. When you walked in here, and I saw how you sat alone, how you looked around like the world still mattered to you, I knew." Keanu looked down at the twine-wrapped notebook again. His fingers hovered over the edges as though it were something sacred. And maybe, in its own quiet way, it was. This wasn't just a kid's scribbles. It was a voice, a legacy left behind by someone who never got the chance to speak from a stage, yet somehow found a way to whisper across time. He looked at Emily. "Has anyone else seen this?" She shook her head. "Only me. And now you. You didn't send it to a university or a foundation?" Number because they'd either shelve it or steal it. Liam didn't want it sold. He wanted it built. Keanu leaned back, the weight of the pages pressing into his chest. He thought about all the projects he'd seen get buried under bureaucracy, all the ideas that never made it past the boardroom table. Liam didn't just design hope, he engineered it. A long silence filled the booth. The kind of silence that asked a question without saying a word. Keanu finally broke it. "Would it be all right if I made copies? Shared this with the right people? People who will honor it?" Emily nodded, her voice almost cracking. "That's why I gave it to you. Not to bury him deeper, but to carry him forward." Just then, a clap of thunder rumbled outside. Rain streaked down the window beside them, the world painted in watery gray. Inside the diner, the lights flickered once, then settled. The hum of conversation continued at the other tables. Coffee cups clinked, plates scraped. Life moved on. But at that small booth near the window, something had changed. Keanu gently retied the twine around the notebook and placed it carefully in his lap. He didn't speak for a long time. He just sat there, the wheels in his mind turning as if the pages had planted a seed he wasn't ready to name just yet. Finally, he looked up. "This isn't just a notebook." Emily tilted her head. Keanu's voice was soft but firm. "This is a blueprint for a better world." She smiled at that. Not the kind of smile that ends in a laugh, but the kind that lives in the eyes, shaped by both pride and grief. "He'd like that," she whispered. Keanu nodded. "Once. Then let's make sure he's never forgotten." Outside, the rain began to ease. The diner lights seemed just a little warmer now. The pages of the sketchbook rested between them like a bridge between past and future, between one life that ended too soon and another that had just been changed forever. The hotel room was quiet, but Keanu's mind wasn't. Rain still tapped against the glass like a steady metronome. Outside, the city of Albuquerque had fallen into that after-midnight stillness. But Keanu hadn't moved from his spot on the edge of the bed. The sketchbook was open in his lap, pages gently illuminated by the warm bedside lamp. Each page seemed to pulse with life. Liam's handwriting carried a rhythm fluid, unhurried, filled with clarity. There were no crossed-out lines, no hesitation, just confidence. Like the boy had lived with this vision burning in his chest for years, and this notebook was his last chance to let it all out before time caught up with him. Keanu turned another page. A design for a water purification system, powered by kinetic motion. The margins were filled with equations. Next to it, a note scribbled in the corner. "Build this one near the desert border. Towns first. People there are dying of thirst." Keanu exhaled slowly. He couldn't ignore this. He wouldn't. He reached for his phone and texted his assistant. "Cancel the next 3 days. All of it. No press, no meetings. I need time." Within seconds, the reply came back. "Understood. Are you okay?" He stared at the screen before typing, "I think I'm finally doing something that matters." He set the phone down and turned back to the notebook. Another page. A set of diagrams for a community power hub using solar and bio-waste. The sketch was rough, but the principles were shockingly advanced. Keanu's brow furrowed. How did a teenager without formal education or access to labs create something so structured, so real? He flipped to the last section, and that's when he saw it again, the engine. Liam's design for a self-charging battery. It wasn't just theoretical. It had layered schematics, thermodynamic references, and a full energy output prediction chart. The kind of thing Keanu remembered seeing during his research trips to MIT and Caltech. And this came from a high school kid who worked shifts at a diner and battled illness in silence. He rubbed his eyes and reached for the phone again. This time, he scrolled through his contacts until he found one. Dr. Marin Ellis, a close friend from MIT. Someone he'd met during a documentary shoot about sustainable energy. She was the head of applied physics and had a reputation for calling out nonsense when she saw it. Keanu pressed call. It rang 3 times before she answered, voice groggy. "Keanu? It's 2 in the morning. I know. I'm sorry, but I need a favor. A big one." She paused. "What kind of favor?" He glanced at the notebook in his lap. "I need you to look at something. It's a design. From a kid. 16 years old. No formal training. But I think he might have discovered something real. Doctor." Marinellis was quiet on the other end of the line. Then, with a soft sigh, she said, "Email it. I'll get up." Keanu snapped a quick scan of the page, making sure to capture every detail. He sent it with a short note. "This was drawn by a kid named Liam. He passed away recently. Please tell me if it's real." He could hear her rustling out of bed. "I'll call you in 20 minutes. Keanu set the notebook aside with reverence and leaned back against the headboard. 20 minutes wasn't long, but it felt eternal. His thoughts circled like restless wind. He thought about Emily's voice, how it shook when she spoke about her brother, the conviction in her eyes, the promise he never made out loud but had already accepted. He thought about how Liam had never seen his ideas reach the world, never had the resources, the mentorship, the platform. He only had dreams and paper. And yet, somehow, those dreams had found their way to Keanu. 26 minutes later, the phone buzzed. Marin's voice was clearer now, alert. "You still up?" "Yeah. What do you think?" "I think this kid might have been a genius," she said, flatly. "These equations are coherent. The energy feedback loop he's proposed, it's elegant, but it holds. I ran some quick simulations based on the numbers. If this works, it could revolutionize energy storage in low-resource environments." Keanu sat up straighter. She continued, "I want to know where he learned this, who mentored him, because the way he approached these concepts, it's like he thought outside of institutions, outside of ego. That's rare, really rare." "No one mentored him," Keanu said quietly. "He figured it out on his own, at a corner booth in a diner." Another pause, then a breath. "You're serious?" "I'm holding the rest of his notebook right now. There's more. Water systems, biofuel, ethics essays. It's like he didn't just want to build things, he wanted to build something better, something that healed people." Silence again. Then Marin said, "You can't sit on this." "I'm not going to." "Then send the whole thing, all of it. I'll call in a few friends, quietly. Let's test what we can, and if it holds, we'll take it from there." Keanu's fingers trembled slightly as he reached for the sketchbook again. "I'll send it tonight," he said. "Do it." "And Keanu?" "Yeah? Who was this kid?" Keanu looked toward the window. The city lights blurred behind the raindrops. "A kid who believed people still cared," he said softly, "and that maybe one day the right person would walk through the door and see what he left behind." Keanu stayed up all night. Each page of Liam's sketchbook pulled him deeper into a world shaped by curiosity, compassion, and clarity far beyond 16 years. The diagrams weren't just technical, they were layered with purpose. Each invention had an annotation. For villages where kids walk miles for water, or for cities where the lights go out but the people still hope. It wasn't just science, it was empathy turned into blueprint. By dawn, Keanu had filled a notebook of his own. Names of people to contact, ideas for outreach, foundations he'd funded in the past that might help now. He wasn't just thinking like a celebrity anymore. He was thinking like a steward, a bridge, a carrier of someone else's legacy. He picked up the phone and called his assistant. "I need you to cancel everything this week," he said calmly. "All of it?" "Yes. Press, meetings, shoots, everything. I'll explain later." The assistant hesitated but trusted his tone. "Got it." Keanu clicked open his laptop and started composing an email. Not just to Marin. This one was to a friend at the UN, another at the Department of Energy, a third in the education nonprofit space. He included a scanned image of Liam's core energy loop design, then added a note at the bottom. This was created by a boy named Liam. He passed away without a degree or recognition. But he saw a world that most of us missed. I think we owe him a look. And if it proves viable, we owe him a future." He hit send. There was no turning back. Later that morning, his phone began to light up again. A former Tesla engineer responded, "The closed-loop timing is almost flawless. Who designed this?" An NGO founder messaged, "Tell me more. We've been trying to crack something like this for years." An MIT professor wrote simply, "This is the work of a systems thinker, and a moral one." By noon, Keanu sat in silence, overwhelmed. It was working, but it wasn't about fame or credit. It was about one boy, gone too soon, who had dared to believe that the right person might walk through the door and take him seriously. Who wrote a letter in secret? Who whispered a wish to his sister on his deathbed? Keanu whispered it back to the room now. "I'm that person, Liam. I hear you." And for the first time in a long while, he felt his life turn towards something larger than himself. Emily stood quietly by the window of her apartment, the sunlight filtering through the blinds as she held a small USB drive between her fingers. She had waited weeks to plug it in again. But today, after what she'd seen in Keanu's eyes the night before, she knew it was time. She walked over to the table and opened her laptop. As the screen flickered to life, the folder labeled Liam Archive blinked on the desktop. She clicked it open. Dozens of videos, audio notes, and scanned sketches spilled across the screen. She pressed play. The first video showed Liam in a hospital bed, a nasal cannula taped gently to his face. His skin was pale, but his eyes were alive, sparking with determination. A borrowed Chromebook rested on his lap, and his fingers moved with fragile precision across the keyboard. Day 143. His voice cracked slightly. "Pain's been rough, but I finished the grease to fuel sketch. It's not perfect yet, but it's close. I figured out how to bypass the clogging problem. If this works, diners like ours could power their own hot water heaters for months." Emily's hand covered her mouth. She hadn't watched this one before. The next clip showed him grinning, his head bald from treatment. "Emily thinks I'm crazy for trying to redesign the grid from my hospital bed, but she's wrong. The grid is broken. That's exactly why I have to." He coughed, then smiled again. "And hey, if I don't make it, maybe someone like Keanu Reeves will see this. He seems like the type who'd care more about truth than titles." The clip ended. Emily sat back, stunned by the clarity of his voice. She remembered how he would sketch between treatments, sometimes with IV lines tangled between his arms and stylus. Nurses had often paused outside the door, watching silently as a boy who had every reason to give up instead built bridges to a world he would never live in. But Liam hadn't drawn for himself. He was building instructions. And now, someone was finally listening. Later, that morning, Keanu met Emily outside her apartment. She carried a slim backpack filled with Liam's hard drives, scraps, and handwritten notes. "Do you want to see where it all began?" she asked. Keanu nodded. They walked through Liam's neighborhood, a small stretch of worn sidewalks and creaky porches. Kids played basketball on cracked courts. A woman hung laundry on a line, humming to herself. A corner bodega sold hot sandwiches and small bags of fruit. "This was the alley behind the diner," Emily pointed. "Liam used to sit here on breaks, sketching the grease converter system. He said the back of the restaurant smelled awful, but the problem inspired him. He said, 'Every stink in this world can be fuel for something better.'" Keanu smiled faintly. That sounded exactly like Liam. They stopped at the town library. Inside, one of the volunteers recognized Emily immediately and smiled warmly. She motioned toward a quiet corner with a dusty desktop computer. "He used to sit there," Emily whispered. "Every afternoon he had strength. That's where he wrote his global kindness algorithm paper." Keanu stared at the desk. The chair wobbled slightly on one leg, the keyboard missing the letter G. Liam had changed the world from here. They walked another few blocks in silence, the town slowly revealing itself through Liam's eyes. Keanu could almost feel the boy's presence as he passed each familiar corner. It was like following breadcrumbs of thought, left behind, not to be admired, but to be understood. Emily led him to the community park next. It wasn't much: 2 swing sets, a broken water fountain, and a few benches that had faded under the sunday. This was Liam's favorite place, she said softly. He called it his thinking ground. He used to sit right there. She pointed to a bench beneath a large oak and sketched strangers he saw doing kind things. One time, a boy shared his lunch with another kid who didn't have anything. Liam cried for hours afterward. He believed little kindnesses were signs of big potential. Keanu sat down on the bench and looked around. The breeze rustled the leaves overhead. A mother was helping her toddler up the slide. A jogger waved at an older man walking his dog. These were the moments Liam had studied, documented, drawn into diagrams and moral equations, proof that hope still lived in the cracks. Emily pulled a folded page from her backpack. It was one of Liam's final sketches. A simple drawing of 2 hands passing a cup of water, one scarred and tired, the other young and open. Underneath, Liam had written, "Clean hands, clean hearts. One act, one ripple." Keanu stared at the page. The line was so simple, but it echoed with something timeless, something that transcended Liam's short years. "I used to think he was too idealistic," Emily admitted. "He'd talk about rebuilding cities with compassion at the center of infrastructure, about kindness networks that could track goodness like currency. I'd laugh and say, 'We can't even get people to agree on where to put a stop sign, Liam.' But he'd just smile and say, 'Then we start with 1 street.'" Keanu turned the page over. On the back was a list of locations: empty warehouses, vacant lots, old church kitchens. Beside each one, Liam had written, "Potential." "Did he ever doubt?" Keanu asked after a moment. Emily nodded slowly. "Of course." The pain got worse. There were nights he begged me to turn it all off to let him stop. But then he'd see an email from a kid in Romania who'd read one of his online papers, or a local teacher who used his design in a science class. That kept him going. They walked a little farther until they reached the edge of the town's small lake. It wasn't grand or clear. In fact, algae floated in patches, and the pier looked like it needed repairs. But Keanu recognized it instantly from a water filtration sketch Liam had drawn in the notebook. "He wanted to clean this place," Emily said. "Not for glory, for the kids," he said. "If one child drinks clean water here because I kept going, that's enough." Keanu stood quietly, letting the sounds of wind and water soak in. The boy had turned pain into purpose. He had taken his numbered days and multiplied their meaning by infinity. And now that mission had landed in Keanu's hands. The next morning, Emily heard a knock at the back door of the diner before sunrise. The delivery truck hadn't even come yet. She opened it, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and there stood Keanu Reeves. He wasn't dressed for a photo shoot or an event. He wore the same black t-shirt and jeans from yesterday, but now with a hoodie pulled over his head. A quiet, unreadable look sat behind his eyes. Emily blinked, still trying to believe he was real. "You okay?" He nodded once, then held up something wrapped carefully in an old cloth napkin. "I brought this back to you," he said. "The notebook." She took it gently, surprised. "You didn't have to." "No," he interrupted softly. "It belongs to both of you. It's not just a book, it's a legacy." He followed her inside, and she poured 2 cups of coffee in silence. The diner was still dark, the kitchen empty, the buzz of the cooler humming faintly. It felt like they were sitting in a sacred space, one that didn't need words. Keanu finally spoke. "I couldn't sleep. I read every word, every diagram, every note Liam left behind. He had the heart of an engineer and the soul of a poet." Emily looked down, her fingers tightening slightly around her mug. "He used to say he was building more than machines. He was building proof that people still care, that someone would pick it up if he couldn't." Keanu leaned forward across the table, his voice steady but gentle. "I want to pick it up, Emily. I want to bring Liam's ideas to life. But I can't do it alone." She looked at him then, really looked. Not at the movie star, but the man across from her, sleep-deprived, emotional, carrying something bigger than himself now. "I've already talked to a professor friend at MIT," he continued. "They're reviewing Liam's biodiesel filtration model this week. The math checks out. It's not just idealism. It's practical, scalable, and beautiful. Emily's eyebrows rose. MIT? He nodded. They want to consult. But what I need is someone who understands where this started. Someone who knows the soul behind the science. She froze, caught between disbelief and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Keanu, I work 2 jobs. I barely graduated high school. I've never taken an engineering course in my life. He didn't flinch. I don't need credentials, he said clearly. I need people who believe. The way he said it hit her chest like a bell being struck. It reverberated through all the doubts she had swallowed for years. You don't even know me, she whispered. I know what your brother saw in you, Keanu replied, and I've seen enough to trust his judgment. For a moment, the silence returned, but now it was filled with something else possibility. Emily reached down and untied the twine around the sketchbook. She opened to the last page, where Liam had scribbled a note in fading ink. If I don't make it, it said, give this to someone who sees the world not as it is, but as it could be. She looked up at Keanu. He must have meant you. Keanu shook his head slowly. He meant us. Emily stood up, almost out of instinct, like she needed to move just to process what was happening. She paced behind the counter, biting her lip, shaking her head. You know what people would say if I left this place to go chase some dream? My manager would laugh. My landlord would panic. My sister would call me reckless. Keanu waited. He didn't interrupt, didn't argue. He just watched her carefully, letting her speak the truth she'd been holding in for too long. I don't come from your world, Keanu. I don't do speeches. I don't have connections. I know how to budget tips, cover a shift, and pay for half a funeral with GoFundMe. She turned to face him, her voice more raw now. I loved my brother, but I don't know the first thing about turning notebooks into real-world systems. I've never led anything in my life. You led him, Keanu said softly. That stopped her cold. You led Liam. Every step, every chemo round, every surgery. You gave him permission to believe that someone cared enough to carry it forward. That matters more than 1,000 conferences. Emily blinked rapidly, trying not to cry again. I don't want to mess it up, she whispered. You won't be alone, Keanu assured her. We'll build a team. Advisors, investors, people who care. But the vision that comes from you and Liam. She lowered her head, gripping the back of a chair like it was the only thing holding her up. I'm scared. Keanu leaned forward again, his voice steady. So am I. She looked at him, surprised. I'm scared I'll start this and not finish it, that it'll get lost in the noise, that I'll fail Liam. But fear doesn't get to decide. He stood now, slowly, deliberately. Hope does. The two stood in the quiet of the diner for a long time as dawn finally began to press through the blinds, throwing streaks of gold across the empty booths. The silence felt like an agreement had been made, even if no contract had been signed. Finally, Emily let out a breath. If I say yes, what happens next? Keanu smiled gently. You pack a bag. She raised an eyebrow. That's it? Number. But it's the first step. He pulled a slip of paper from his pocket, slid it across the table. There's a private foundation in Austin. They've built clean energy prototypes from open source community ideas. I called in a favor. They'll let us run Liam's design in their lab. Emily picked up the paper with shaking hands. This is real. It always was, he replied. It just needed someone to believe it. She sat back down, looking once more at the sketchbook. Now, more sacred than ever. Her thumb ran along the edge of a page that had a grease smudged. Fingerprint Liam's, a fragment of him still clinging to his work. I don't know what I'm doing, she said honestly. Keanu nodded. Good. That means you'll ask the right questions. She laughed quietly, her voice thick. You make it sound so easy. It won't be, he admitted, but it will be worth it. They both stood now, moving toward the door. He paused at the threshold, looking out into the morning light. You're not stepping away from something, Emily. You're stepping into it. She followed him outside. The street was still quiet, the sky just turning pink. For a second, it felt like the world was holding its breath. "I'll need to give notice," she murmured. "Take a week," he said. "But let's meet in Austin next Sunday." Emily nodded slowly. Then she turned toward the rising sun and whispered, "Okay." The lab wasn't glamorous. In fact, it looked more like a converted storage unit tucked into the back lot of a tech incubator in Austin. The walls were lined with mismatched whiteboards and leftover wiring. A broken coffee machine stood proudly in the corner, leaking just enough to stain the floor but not enough to retire. But to Emily, it might as well have been NASA headquarters. She stood at the workbench, her hair tied back, eyes focused as she traced over one of Liam's sketches, now enlarged and pinned across a corkboard like blueprints to a revolution. Keanu was beside her, sleeves rolled up, soldering wires with a calm patience that seemed out of place for someone used to cameras and chaos. He had hired a handful of advisors engineers from Stanford, Michigan T, and even one from Tesla's retired battery division. They were smart, seasoned, and skeptical. "I'm sorry," one of them said on the first day, peering at the scribbled napkin diagram Emily had unfolded. "This looks like a science fair project drawn with crayons." Emily didn't flinch. That science fair project got reviewed by a Pruckett, quantum mechanics professor and a green energy pioneer, who called it unreasonably accurate. The engineer gave her a look. "You mean Dr. Hirschfeld?" Keanu nodded from across the room. "Yes." He said it was genius. The room quieted. Still, doubt hung thick in the air that first week. The prototype refused to behave. Readings were inconsistent. Components overheated. One intern even whispered, "Maybe this Liam kid just dreamed too big." Emily heard it, and she didn't say a word. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves, pulled out Liam's notebook, and reread his words again and again like scripture. "I believe energy doesn't have to hurt the planet. I believe the grid can be rebuilt, one plate of fries at a time." By week 2, things began to shift. A retired electrical engineer named Marla adjusted one of the copper coils, murmuring, "Wait a second, that's not noise, that's modulation." They ran a second test. This time, the energy transfer was clean. Low heat, high efficiency. Emily looked up, blinking in disbelief. It's working." Keanu smiled for the first time in days. He did it. From that moment, the room changed. Skepticism gave way to focus. Engineers stopped snickering and started studying. Interns brought in coffee at 6 a.m. without being asked. Marla canceled her cruise. By month's end, they had a working prototype. A small modular clean energy converter, about the size of a desktop printer, capable of powering an entire diner using thermal capture from existing appliances and ambient motion. It was elegant, efficient, and shockingly affordable to build. The team gathered around the humming device, its light glowing softly. Emily touched it, her hand trembling. He called it Version Hope in the notes. Keanu nodded. "Let's name it after him." She looked at him, eyes full. "The Liam engine." The team clapped. No one laughed anymore. The day they announced the pilot project, the skies over Austin were overcast, but inside the lab, there was nothing but light. Emily stood in front of a small podium, her hands clasped nervously. She wore a button-up shirt and jeans. Behind her, a makeshift banner read, "The Liam Engine Initiative," in bold, hand-painted letters. Next to her stood Keanu, calm, centered, but his eyes radiating pride. A few journalists had been invited, nothing fancy, just a couple of local stations and one curious blogger from a renewable energy magazine. Darla was there too, wearing a floral dress and holding a bouquet of daisies she'd brought for Emily. Her diner would be the first testing ground for the Liam engine. When Emily stepped up to the microphone, her voice trembled for a moment, but steadied quickly. "My brother Liam once said, 'The world isn't broken. It's just waiting for someone to notice the cracks and fill them with kindness and courage.' He didn't live to see this day, but his ideas did." She gestured to the small unit sitting on a table beside her. Its polished shell gleamed under the lab lights. "This is the Liam engine, and this is just the beginning." The applause that followed wasn't loud. but it was deeply genuine. Some of the engineers had tears in their eyes. Even Darla sniffled. Keanu stepped forward next. "I've spent most of my life playing other people, but today I get to stand beside someone who's living out something real." Emily and Liam saw something most of us miss: the invisible systems that run our lives. And they imagined a better one that heals instead of harms. This engine is about more than power, it's about purpose. Later that afternoon, the team packed up the prototype and drove out to Darla's diner. Installing the engine took 3 days. They cleared space near the back of the kitchen, rerouted some grease traps, and connected it to the building's grid. At first glance, the technology looked too simple. A few valves, a thermal chamber, a radiant coil system, and a repurposed battery unit that stored power like a silent heartbeat. On the 4th morning, Darla came into the diner and noticed something odd. The lights were brighter. The kitchen ran quieter. Her energy bill, updated by the smart meter, had dropped by 47% overnight, and there hadn't been a single spark of waste. When she told her regulars, the news spread fast. Within 2 weeks, more diners called, then a bakery, then a church. Emily found herself speaking at community centers, not as a grieving sister, but as the co-founder of a technology initiative that was starting to gain real traction. She even had business cards now. They were simple and clean. Emily Rivera, co-founder, the Liam Engine Project. She kept one tucked inside Liam's notebook, just beneath the page where he'd once scribbled, "If you can dream it, build it. If you can build it, share it." And share it she would. Because now she wasn't just carrying her brother's dream, she was living it. It started with a single headline: Keanu Reeves funds teen's invention after tragic death. By morning, it was everywhere. Major networks picked it up with glowing segments. The anchors smiled as they introduced clips of Darla's diner, now powered by what they called a miracle machine born of grief and genius. Talk shows ran montages set to inspirational music. News sites pushed push notifications like it was breaking news. Social media exploded. Clips of Emily's launch speech were reposted millions of times. A video of the Liam engine humming quietly behind the diner's kitchen hit 10 million views within 24 hours. Someone made a remix of Liam's quote, "The world's not broken, it's just waiting," paired with dramatic music and Keanu's face fading into the sky. Within 48 hours, the hashtag number, the Liam engine, trended across platforms. Schools began discussing it. STEM clubs requested blueprints. A nonprofit offered to donate solar conversion panels to complement the system. Everyone wanted in. And with that attention came the storm. It started quietly, with a few skeptical blog posts. Then an anonymous account posted, "This smells like a PR stunt. Hollywood saving the poor again." Then came the videos. Podcasters speculated on Keanu's motivations. Was this tied to a secret movie? A tech startup? Was he trying to rehabilitate his image, even though there wasn't anything to rehabilitate? A few headlines turned sharp. Keanu's clean energy dream, or calculated career move? Feel good or feel fake? Critics questioned celebrity charity. Even though most people were inspired, the negativity echoed louder than it should have, and it stung. Emily saw the comments before Keanu did. She had been reading through messages of support when she clicked on a link someone had sent. The video played in her tiny apartment, where she sat cross-legged on the floor with Liam's old hoodie wrapped around her shoulders. A man with slicked back, hair, and an expensive suit pointed at a still image of Keanu beside the engine. "This is textbook PR," he said. "The underdog narrative, the dying kid, the sad sister, the noble actor. Don't get me wrong, I love Keanu as much as the next guy, but come on, this is scripted." Emily stared at the screen for a long time after it ended. Then she closed her laptop. The next morning, her phone rang. It was a local news outlet in Austin asking for a follow-up interview. She almost said no. Her hands trembled as she held the phone. She hadn't done this kind of thing before, but something in her heart told her to speak, so she agreed. The reporter met her at the diner, cameras rolling as the smell of pancakes filled the air. Emily wore the same necklace she'd worn to Liam's funeral, his initials engraved on a tiny silver disc. She looked straight into the lens, took a deep breath, and spoke from the heart. My brother Liam never wanted to be famous. He wanted to be useful. He wasn't trying to go viral. He was trying to fix something. He spent his last months hooked up to machines, sketching a dream he knew he might never see. And Keanu didn't find that notebook because of some PR team. He found it because he ordered a steak in a diner that still believes in listening to people. The interview aired that night. Emily's voice didn't crack. Her hands didn't shake. She spoke with a clarity and weight that no Hollywood script could fake. By the time the segment ended, the comment section was already flooded. She's not acting. That's love. Liam's dream is real. You can feel it. She just restored my faith in humanity. One post went viral. I didn't believe in heroes until today. The backlash slowed. Not because trolls disappeared, but because Emily's truth hit deeper. People felt it. Parents of terminally ill children reached out. Teachers sent letters, saying they played Emily's interview for their students. Veterans groups, environmental engineers, and diners across America offered support. Through it all, Keanu remained silent. He didn't grant interviews. He didn't comment online. He didn't defend himself or issue statements. He just showed up to the lab each day, sleeves rolled up, face focused, listening more than talking. When a journalist finally caught up with him outside the lab and asked if he wanted to respond to the criticism, Keanu gave a quiet shrug. "I'm not here for applause," he said. "I'm here for Liam." Then he turned and went back inside. That quote became a headline of its own. "I'm not here for applause, I'm here for Liam." Those words echoed across the internet like a bell. Suddenly, the narrative shifted again. People began to dig deeper into the story, not the viral version, but the human version. They learned about Liam's hospital drawings, about Emily working night shifts while caring for him, about how the diner staff chipped in to keep the lights on during their hardest winter. And they learned about Keanu's quiet visits long before any press caught wind, how he sat in Liam's room and asked him questions about circuits, how he'd return days later with materials Liam had only dreamed about, how he gave without ever filming a single moment. That part hadn't made the headlines until now. The more people learned, the more the noise died down. Trolls went quiet, or at least drowned out by something stronger: community. Letters arrived at Darla's diner from strangers who felt changed. Some donated, some visited. One family drove 3 states just to sit at the booth Keanu had first sat in. But it wasn't about celebrity anymore. It was about Liam. It was about belief. And for Emily, it was about something else too: healing. One night after locking up the lab, Keanu found her sitting on a bench outside. She looked up, tired but proud. The lights of the diner glowed behind them, powered now not just by solar and steam, but by memory. He sat beside her without a word. After a while, she whispered, "I almost gave up, you know that?" Keanu nodded slowly, "But I couldn't, because he didn't." They sat in the quiet. Then, softly, she added, "I'm ready for whatever comes next." Keanu smiled, but said nothing. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest way to honor a boy who only wanted to fix a broken world. The morning air was crisp, the kind that made every breath feel like a promise. Emily stood outside Darla's diner, her hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what was about to happen. The prototype sat behind the building. Quiet for now. A sleek, compact structure with soft green LED indicators and polished panels. Unlike the bulky machines people imagined when they thought of alternative energy, this one felt almost gentle, graceful. Like it had a soul. The team had been up since dawn. Engineers ran diagnostics. Local electricians double-checked the rewiring. A city inspector with thick glasses and a clipboard walked around with a skeptical look, but even he couldn't find anything out of place. Keanu moved between groups quietly, asking questions, offering tools, sometimes just observing. Word had spread, not just through social media, but through something older and stronger community. Townspeople who remembered Liam had come. Teachers, classmates, neighbors. Some came out of pure curiosity, others because they believed. Darla closed the diner for the morning. She had set up folding chairs and free coffee for the crowd. A hand-painted banner hung across the front window. "Today we shine for Liam." The mayor stood by with a pair of oversized scissors, ready to cut the ribbon when it was time. But the heart of the day wasn't in the officials or cameras. It was in the nervous energy radiating from Emily as she checked the control panel again. The day had arrived, and Liam's machine, Liam's dream, was about to be tested not in a lab, but in the real world. "All systems green," said one of the engineers, a young woman named Priya, who had joined the project after watching Emily's interview online. Emily nodded, then looked toward Keanu. He gave her a reassuring smile. "You ready?" he asked. She hesitated. Can anyone ever really be ready for something like this? He tilted his head slightly. Liam was. That made her breath catch. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small laminated photo. It was Liam, grinning, holding up a sketch of the engine he had drawn while in his hospital bed. She placed it gently on the control panel, like a captain laying down a compass. Then she took a deep breath. "I'm ready." The mayor stepped up to the mic, gave a short speech about innovation and the future, then signaled for the ribbon to be cut. It fluttered to the ground, and with that, Emily pressed the activation button. For a second, there was silence. Then the soft hum began low, steady, alive. A pulse of light flowed through the cables. The solar panels adjusted their angle. Steam valves opened with a hiss as they met the stored pressure. The engine whirred to life. The crowd gasped. The lights inside Darla's diner flickered, then stabilized. An overhead fan began to spin. A neon open sign lit up in the window. And just like that, for the first time ever, a business in the town was running on clean hybrid energy, powered not by fossil fuels, but by a machine born from a dying boy's imagination. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She covered her mouth with both hands and stepped back. "He did it," she whispered, then louder. "He really did it." The crowd erupted into applause. Some clapped. Others simply stood in stunned silence, trying to understand the moment. Children who had never met Liam stared at the glowing machine like it was a spaceship. Elders wiped away tears as they whispered things like, "I remember that boy," or, "He always talked about fixing the world." Darla came forward and hugged Emily tightly. "I swear, I felt him," she said, "like he was standing right here." Emily nodded into her shoulder. She couldn't speak yet. Her throat was thick with emotion, her mind a whirlwind of memory and meaning. Liam's laughter echoed in her chest, as if the machine had reached into the past and pulled him forward just for a few seconds. Keanu stepped back, letting Emily be the center of it. He didn't smile wide. He didn't wave for the cameras. He just looked up at the clear sky, hands in his pockets, eyes searching for something beyond what anyone else could see. And then, softly, he whispered, "Thank you, Liam." Nobody heard it, but it didn't need to be heard. It was between him and the boy who had once believed the world was broken but fixable. A reporter tried to push a microphone toward Keanu. He gently declined. Another approached with a camera crew, asking for a soundbite. He shook his head. "This isn't about me," he said simply. The attention shifted back to the machine. Local journalists interviewed the engineers, city officials, and Darla, but the most requested voice was Emily. They gathered around her near the prototype, asking how it felt, what it meant, what came next. "I'm not an expert," she said. "I'm not even an engineer. I believed in my brother. And I met someone else who did too." She paused and looked over at Keanu. He didn't just build this for Liam. He built it with Liam. A silence fell over the crowd again. This time, not from shock, but reverence. What they had witnessed wasn't just an engine turning on. It was a promise coming true. A voice that had been silenced by illness, now speaking through circuits and wires and sunlight. By evening, news trucks lined the block. Drone footage was already making its rounds online. Emily's quote had become the headline. He didn't just build it for Liam, he built it with Liam. Social media lit up with comments from all over the world. Artists began sketching tributes. Engineers offered to volunteer. Diners and small businesses across the U.S. began requesting the Liam engine for their locations. But in that little town, as the sun dipped low and the diner lights continued to glow clean and steady, the heart of the story remained quiet and unshaken. Keanu walked with Emily to the edge of the parking lot. "Liam started something," she said, still overwhelmed. I don't know what to do next." Keanu looked at her, calm and sure. "We keep going," he said. "One light at a time." Emily turned to look back at the machine. The soft hum still echoed through the air. It wasn't just generating power, it was generating hope. And for the first time since her brother passed, she didn't feel like she was carrying his dream alone. 6 months later, the map looked very different. Small red dots blinked across the country, each one representing a diner, cafe, or corner store now powered by a Liam engine. From dusty roadside diners in New Mexico to chilly breakfast nooks in Vermont, the clean, silent hum of energy was changing how people viewed power and possibility. What began as a tribute had quietly turned into a movement. In a modest but modern office space on the outskirts of Los Angeles, rows of desks buzzed with activity. Young engineers, coders, designers, and logistics coordinators worked side by side. At the center of it all, a modest nameplate rested on a glass office door. Emily Harper, Director of Outreach, Liam Innovations inside. Emily sat in front of 2 monitors, scanning updates from the latest installations in Texas and Michigan. Her phone vibrated almost constantly. Press inquiries, community requests, pilot programs in schools. But for a brief moment, she leaned back and closed her eyes. She could hear Liam's voice in her head again. "I just want to make something that matters." And he had. Across the country, families sat in booths under light fixtures powered by his ideas. Diners once struggling to pay their electric bills were thriving again, their customers proud to support something sustainable. And perhaps most importantly, kids growing up in those towns were asking new questions. What's a Liam engine? Can I build one? The ripple effect had begun. Keanu arrived just after lunch with a small box tucked under his arm. Emily looked up from her desk, surprised to see him without cameras, press, or an entourage. "I brought something," he said, setting the box down. Emily opened it slowly. Inside was a metal nameplate, simple but engraved with care. "Liam's Table for Dreamers Who Dare. It's going in the new Denver office," Keanu said, "right at the heart of the lounge area. Every employee will walk past it." Emily swallowed. Hard. She traced the edge of the nameplate with her fingers. "You're making sure no one forgets him." Keanu gave a small smile. He made sure we remembered what mattered. Later that week, the team traveled to San Francisco, where a major tech conference had invited Keanu to deliver the closing keynote. The audience wasn't just filled with engineers and entrepreneurs, it was packed with students, small business owners, and families who had applied for Liam engines in their neighborhoods. The lights dimmed, and the screen behind the stage lit up with a collage of faces from all over the country, people sitting in Liam-powered spaces, sending thank you messages, holding up signs that read things like "My diner runs on hope" and "Clean energy, big heart." Keanu stepped onto the stage with quiet grace, adjusting the microphone before looking out at the crowd. "I've been in a lot of films," he began, "and in most of them, someone saves the world. But Liam wasn't trying to save the world. He was just trying to help his sister, to keep a promise to their mom, to use what he had." He paused. Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the biggest visions. The room went completely still. Emily stood backstage, hands clasped tightly, fighting back tears. She wasn't just proud of her brother. She was proud of herself for not letting fear stop her, for believing in something when no one else would, for carrying forward a dream that could have easily been lost in grief. After the keynote, Keanu and Emily walked through the convention center together. Strangers stopped them with handshakes and thank yous, but Keanu kept his answers short, his focus on Emily. "You were incredible," he said. "I was just standing backstage." She laughed nervously. "You were the reason we were on that stage at all." They stepped outside into the cool evening air. A small crowd had gathered across the street, not for autographs, but to take pictures. Beside a temporary exhibit built by students from Oregon State, an exact replica of the first Liam engine installed at Darla's Diner. On a plaque below the structure were the words, "This engine didn't just power lights, it powered change." Emily stared at it for a long time. "I still hear him, you know," she said softly. "In the way people talk about hope, about ideas, like he never really left." Keanu didn't respond right away. He simply placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "He hasn't." Back in Los Angeles, Liam innovations grew faster than expected. Requests came in daily from nonprofits, rural schools, low-income neighborhoods, places where power costs had pushed communities into darkness. The foundation created in Liam's name began funding high school robotics clubs, offering scholarships to teenagers who showed promise in renewable tech. And at the center of it all, Emily thrived. She had gone from cleaning tables at a diner to leading a national outreach campaign. Her instincts, her empathy, her refusal to let bureaucracy dilute the mission they made her indispensable. Employees admired her. Communities trusted her. Keanu leaned on her. During a quarterly review, one of the board members asked Keanu why he'd placed such big responsibility on someone with no formal education. He didn't flinch. "Because she remembers who this is for." That single sentence shut down any further questions. As months passed, Liam engines became a household term. Not because of flashy marketing, but because people felt something different when they saw that small silver logo on a building. It stood for resilience, for quiet genius, for family. One day, Keanu surprised Emily with a visit to the original booth at Darla's Diner, the very place she had slipped him that napkin note all those months ago. The table was now encased in glass, preserved with photos, drawings, and scribbled calculations from Liam's notebook. "I thought it might feel cheesy," Emily admitted, "but it doesn't." "No," Keanu said, "it feels right." They sat in silence for a while. Outside the window, the streetlights flickered on, powered by a grid partially supported by a nearby Liam engine. "I never thought grief could turn into something like this," Emily said. "Something that spreads." Keanu looked at her with calm conviction. "Grief is love with nowhere to go. You gave it somewhere." That night, they walked out of the diner, side by side. Above them, the stars blinked down like quiet applause. The legacy wasn't just in the machines. It was in the people. In every diner owner who dared to hope again. In every teenager who stayed up late sketching plans by flashlight. In every little brother who watched his sister believe in something bigger than herself. And it was just the beginning. 6 months after the Liam engine launched at Darla's Diner, something unexpected began happening. It started as a trickle, emails, handwritten letters, drawings, folded into envelopes, and then it became a wave. A middle school teacher in Boise uploaded a video to social media of her student, a 13-year-old girl named Kaylee, standing beside a handmade water filtration system. It was built out of soda bottles, copper wire, and an old coffee filter. In the video, Kaylee explained, in soft but confident words, that her idea came from one of Liam's engine diagrams. She had noticed a particular coiled component and thought, what if water flowed through that instead of power? Her design filtered out heavy metals. It required no electricity, and it could be made for under $10. The video got fewer than 1,000 views on its first day, but by the end of the week, it had crossed 1 million. Not because of celebrity endorsements, not because of algorithms, but because people felt something honest in her voice, something rare. Keanu saw the clip on a late-night scroll through his phone. He didn't cry, but he did watch it 3 times. The foundation reached out to Kaylee's family the next morning. Within a month, she had received a grant to continue her work. Her purifier was shipped to rural towns in Arizona, then to schools in Kenya. On the base of every unit was a small plaque that read, "Inspired by Liam, built by Kaylee." Meanwhile, in Detroit, an 11th grade student named Marcus was tinkering with scrap electronics behind his father's auto repair shop. He had always been good with his hands, but didn't care much for school. That changed the day his science teacher handed him a photocopy of Liam's notebook. Marcus stared at the sketches like they were treasure maps. For weeks, he scavenged materials from discarded TVs and solar lawn lights. Using nothing but a cracked voltmeter and an old soldering gun, Marcus built a functional solar panel designed to power a single room for a full day. The panel cost less than $30 to build. He posted his results on a tech forum. The post exploded. Within days, journalists were knocking on the repair shop door. They wanted to know who this kid was, why he wasn't in Silicon Valley. Marcus just shrugged. I just followed Liam's instructions. He already figured out the hard part. Liam Innovations immediately reached out. Not to turn Marcus into a spokesperson or a brand, but to give him resources, mentors, support. Marcus used his grant money to buy his dad a new set of tools. Then he asked for a whiteboard and a folding table in the back of the shop where he kept designing. One of his prototypes is now powering lights in a community center on the west side of Detroit. The walls of that center are painted with murals by local kids. One of them shows a boy in a red hoodie holding up a glowing panel. The caption below says, "Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Liam." And still, the stories kept coming. In Louisiana, a pair of teenage sisters repurposed the Liam engine's turbine concept into a portable fan system for disaster shelters. Their town had seen 3 hurricanes in 2 years, and every time the power failed, the shelters became unbearable. Using recycled plastic, bicycle gears, and small rechargeable batteries, they built fans that could run for 48 hours without needing a wall outlet. When a local reporter asked what made them try something so bold, the older sister Naomi smiled and held up a crumpled article she had taped to their garage wall. It was the first story about Darla's Diner, about Keanu and Emily, about Liam. The article had a quote that read, "It wasn't about building an empire, it was about building what he believed in." That quote had stuck with them. So they built what they believed in too. The Liam Foundation soon launched an annual competition called the Spark Awards. But it wasn't just for kids with perfect grades or elite school access. It was for thinkers, tinkerers, dreamers, anyone who scribbled ideas in the margins of their notebooks during class, anyone who looked at a broken lawnmower and saw the skeleton of a generator. Submissions poured in from every corner of the country. In Vermont, a boy created a system for turning food waste from diners into biofuel. In Phoenix, a deaf girl used vibration sensors and LED lights to help detect gas leaks in kitchens. Each invention told a story, not just of technical brilliance, but of empathy. Each kid wasn't trying to change the world alone. They were responding to a wound, a gap, a silent space they noticed and decided to fill. Emily now oversaw the foundation full-time. She reviewed every entry herself. Some made her laugh, some made her cry. All of them made her proud. She often thought of Liam's tiny bedroom, the papers taped to his walls, the way his hands would tremble with excitement when he talked about solving problems no one else cared about. His dream had never been to be famous. It was to be understood, to be useful. Now he was both. One morning, as Keanu walked through the innovation lab in San Francisco, he noticed a new addition. A wall had been quietly installed, filled with laminated drawings, letters, and photographs. A header carved into the wood read, "The Ripple Wall." There was Kaylee's purifier, Marcus's solar unit, Naomi's fan, but also dozens more, anonymous, humble, human. Underneath it all, in bold black letters, were Liam's words from an old journal. What if we all just tried? Keanu stood there for a long time. No cameras, no press. Just him and the echoes of what a boy with a failing heart had managed to start. He reached out and gently touched the corner of Marcus's solar panel sketch. Then he smiled and whispered under his breath, "I hear you, Liam," loud and clear. The ripple wasn't just moving, it was spreading. Across towns, across hearts, across time, and it had only just begun. The first snow had started to fall just outside Darla's Diner when Keanu returned. It was quiet that morning, unusually still. The roads were wet but glistening, the kind of cold that didn't bite but wrapped itself around you gently, like a familiar memory. Keanu stepped out of the car, paused for a second, and looked up at the sign. It hadn't changed. The old red letters still flickered a little at the edge, like they always had. Inside, the smell of cinnamon rolls and old coffee lingered in the air. Emily stood behind the counter, wiping down a clean surface. Though it didn't need cleaning, her eyes lifted as he walked in. She smiled, tired, but warm. "I knew you'd come today," she said softly. Keanu nodded. No need for small talk. There never had been, not between them. Their connection had long ago moved beyond words. It was something understood. Without saying anything more, Emily reached under the counter and pulled out a small envelope. It was cream-colored, sealed with a piece of navy tape. His name was written across the front in shaky pencil-lined script. "Liam told me to give you this the next time it snowed," Emily said, placing the envelope in his hand. "He said you'd understand." Keanu sat down in the same booth he had once shared with Liam, the booth near the window, the one with a crooked napkin holder and a slight tilt in the seat. He stared at the envelope for a moment, his thumb brushing lightly over the pencil lines. Then he opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly in thirds. He unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was familiar, not just because it was Liam's, but because it carried that same pulse, that same rhythm of thought and feeling that had always set the boy apart. There were no diagrams, no calculations this time. Just words. Simple, honest, beautiful. "Dear Mr. Reeves, if you're reading this, then the stars must be out again. I hope they're bright tonight. Thank you for being the kind of man who listens to whispers. When people laughed at me for dreaming too big, you didn't. When the world moved too fast for me to keep up, you slowed down and walked beside me. You didn't try to fix everything. You just showed up, again and again. That's what changed everything. You always said I was brave. But the truth is, I only found that courage because you handed it to me in pieces. With every visit, every question, every look that said, I believe you, even when I didn't believe myself. I always knew you'd be the one to turn light into power, pain into purpose, and grief into hope. The engine was never just about energy. It was about trying. It was about believing that even a sick kid in a small town could be seen and heard and taken seriously by someone like you. Thank you for making that true. I'll see you among the stars. Love, Liam." Keanu's hand trembled slightly as he lowered the page to the table. His eyes burned, but he didn't wipe them. He let the tears fall, silent and sure, like the snow outside. Across from him, the booth felt full again. Keanu folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope, as if it were something sacred. He placed it in his coat pocket, close to his heart, and leaned back against the worn leather booth. Outside the window, the snow had started to swirl, slow and steady, covering the sidewalk in a soft white layer. Everything felt quiet, but not empty. More like the world was holding its breath. Emily came over, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She placed one in front of him without a word and slid into the opposite side of the booth. They sat in silence for a moment, sipping, listening to the hum of the heater and the occasional clink of utensils from the kitchen. The same booth, the same view. But everything had changed. "He wrote it a week before he passed," Emily said softly. "He didn't want anyone else to see it first. He said it was yours, and yours alone." Keanu looked down at the mug, steam curling up toward his face. He always thought ahead. Emily gave a faint smile. That boy carried more light in him than most people ever find. Keanu nodded slowly, and somehow he passed it on. The diner door opened, letting in a gust of cold wind and a flurry of snowflakes. A young couple entered, brushing off their jackets, then a man in a delivery uniform, then a family of 4. Word had spread that Keanu was back in town, but nobody came up to him. Nobody asked for selfies or autographs. They just glanced his way, nodded respectfully, and took their seats. Something unspoken had settled over the town since Liam's passing, a deeper kind of reverence. It wasn't about celebrity or fame. It was about connection. About what happens when someone leaves behind more than memories, when they leave behind momentum. Emily broke the silence again. The foundation's doing well. We've already got applications from 3 high school inventors. One of them built a wind-powered phone charger out of recycled bike parts. Keanu's eyes lit up. That sounds like something Liam would have laughed at, then improved. He would have wanted to meet them all, she said. He would have wanted to tell them it's okay to be weird and obsessed and curious. He still is, Keanu replied. Through you, through me, through every kid who dares to try. Emily looked down, her fingers wrapped around her mug. I still miss him. Every day. I know, Keanu said quietly. Me too. A long pause followed. Not uncomfortable, just real. The kind of silence that doesn't demand to be filled. Then, Keanu stood. He reached into his coat pocket, took out the envelope again, and held it for a moment before setting it gently on the table between them. Make a copy, he said. Frame it here. Not for me. For the next kid who sits in this booth and dares to think different. Emily's eyes shimmered. She nodded. Keanu turned to leave, but paused at the door. He looked back one more time at the place where Liam used to sit. His lips curved into a quiet smile. See you among the stars, kid, he whispered. And with that, he stepped back into the snow. It started with a rainy night. Not a press conference, not a news headline, not a viral moment. Just a quiet diner, a folded note, and a plate of steak growing cold while a boy with shaking hands left everything he had on the line. And somehow that one act, that one whisper into the chaos of the world changed everything. People ask me all the time now, what made me stop that night? Why I opened the note? Why I read it? Why I didn't throw it away with the bill or slide it into my jacket and forget? The truth is, I don't know. Maybe something in the way he looked at me. Maybe something in the silence. Maybe it was just time. Time for me to stop moving so fast. Time to hear what I hadn't let myself hear in years. I opened that note expecting nothing. What I found was a dream. A dream written in pencil, smudged in places, barely legible in others. It wasn't polished. It wasn't professional. It was raw, messy, brilliant, and more than anything, it was hopeful. It spoke about engines that didn't burn, but breathed. About motion without destruction. About light without waste. It didn't just want to fix the world. It wanted to forgive it. And somehow, in all that science and scribble, I saw a reflection of something I'd buried long ago. Belief, not in perfection, but in possibility. Liam didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for fame. He didn't even ask for a response. He just asked to be heard. That note could have ended up in the trash. And this story could have ended before it began. But it didn't, because something told me to listen. Sometimes, the most powerful stories don't start in boardrooms. They don't start in corner offices or scripted speeches. They start with a waitress too tired to fake a smile. They start with a boy too brilliant to stay quiet. They start with someone like you, sitting in a booth, wondering if your voice matters. It does. Every ripple we see in the world today, every diner, powered by Liam's engine, every child sketching ideas on the back of a napkin, every small-town school, teaching kids to dream again. It all started because one boy believed someone would care enough to listen, and someone did. It's easy to look at the world right now and feel like you don't matter, that your ideas are too small, that your voice is too soft, that your hope is too naive. But I promise you, it's not. Liam proved that. He showed me what I'd forgotten, that kindness is a form of fuel, that dreams aren't just private wishes, they're seeds, and when you plant them in the right place, they grow into revolutions. Not loud ones, not the kind that demand attention, but quiet ones. Movements of grace, movements of courage, movements of vision, movements that last. And now, as I look back on everything that's happened, I'm not thinking about the applause. I'm not thinking about the headlines or the camera crews or the big foundation numbers. I'm thinking about that night, that first spark, that folded piece of paper that held a world inside. I still carry that note with me. It's worn now. The corners are frayed. The pencil is faint. But every time I unfold it, I hear his voice again. Not the sound of it, but the soul behind it. Mr. Reeves, thank you for being the kind of man who listens to whispers. That line plays in my mind more than anything I've ever read in a script. Because Liam wasn't trying to impress me. He was trying to remind me that being heard isn't a privilege reserved for the powerful. It's a right earned by having the courage to speak. And when someone speaks from the heart, no matter how quiet it sounds, the world shifts. The world shifted for me. It shifted for Emily, who now leads an in-Precate energy startup inspired by Liam's vision. It shifted for diners all across the country now running on clean energy. It shifted for children who once felt invisible, now sketching inventions on their bedroom floors, no longer waiting for permission to believe in their ideas. This isn't just about one boy anymore. This is a movement. A quiet revolution built on listening, on believing, and on daring to answer the question, what if it worked? What if your idea worked? What if your invention saved one person? What if your kindness lit a spark in someone who was ready to give up? What if your voice, yes, yours, carried the message someone else needed to hear? Liam didn't live to see all of this unfold, but he saw far enough ahead to believe it could. And that belief is still moving through the world like wind, through leaves, silent, steady, undeniable. We don't always get to see the legacy we leave, but we can choose to leave one by paying attention, by slowing down, by choosing empathy over ego, purpose over popularity. That's what Liam did, and that's what I'll spend the rest of my life honoring. If you're watching this, maybe there's something stirring in you. Maybe there's a note you haven't written yet, or maybe you've written it again and again, and you're waiting for someone to finally read it. Let this be your sign. Don't stop writing. Don't stop believing. And don't stop whispering, even if the world seems too loud. Because somewhere, someone is listening, and they're ready. Before we end this incredible story, I want to ask you something from the heart. Who gave you the courage to chase something bigger than yourself? Who whispered into your life when the noise got too loud? Comment below. I want to hear your story. And if you believe in the power of impossible dreams, in second chances, and in the voices the world tends to ignore, hit subscribe. Liam would have loved that. He believed in strangers. He believed in you. And now, maybe, it's your turn to believe in someone else. Let's keep the ripple going. Because this is just the beginning.